Good morning and welcome to 365 Days of Stories with Theo Mayer. Here we are today, 72, and I'm continuing the story of the Arabian Astrologer. Now, as you might remember, Ibrahim Ibn had guided the king up to the circular room, on top of which was the bronze horseman, and beneath which and within the room was this table, like a board that had horsemen and footmen on it, and they were moving about. Now, one thing of note is that the horseman that was on top of the tower, the bronze horseman, if everything was good, the lance would move to the vertical position and would just, the warrior would be ready. But if there was danger, then the lance would go into the horizontal position, ready for battle, and then it would point in the direction that the danger was coming from. So it was pointing at the Pass of Lopez, and the king was there at the table now with Ibrahim Ibn, and Ibrahim instructed him and said, "King, there's an army that's approaching, and certainly they're within the mountains right now, in the Sierras, perhaps even inside of Granada. And these pieces on the table show that they are active. Now, the little miniature lance that's there, if you would like there to be bloodshed amongst them, then use the point of the lance and prod the pieces on the board. But if you would just like them to be in confusion and chaos, and soon after retreat, then use the blunt end of the lance." Well, the king thought about this for a minute. He took up the bodkin and he said, "Let there be blood." And he began to poke the horsemen and the footmen with the point of the lance. There was great confusion, and some of the pieces would just fall down on the board as if they were dead. And then he used the blunt end of the stick as well and began to prod the pieces with that. And soon, all the pieces gathered together and fled to one side of the board. Now, Ibrahim, it was all he could do to get the king to stop prodding the pieces. But he stayed his hand and said, "King, it's over. You've done what needed to be done." And the king said, "Well, how do I know what's happened?" And Ibrahim suggested that he send a group of scouts out to see what had taken place. And so the king sent out a convoy of men, and they went to the Pass of Lopez, and they discovered numerous warriors that had been slain right there in the pass, but they were all from the same place. And then they had seen where the tracks showed that the horses and the foot soldiers had retreated. And on further investigation, they found out that indeed this army had been within sight of Granada, and suddenly they had turned their weapons upon each other, and they had slain a great number of themselves before they then gathered themselves up and in great confusion fled. Well, when this news came back to the king, he was elated. He was like, "Oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing. I can take care of my kingdom and not shed a single drop of blood of my own soldiers, and I don't have to go into battle myself." He was very excited by this whole thing. And it was not long before another army appeared, and then another, and another, and another. And the king was just elated to go up into that room and wreak havoc upon his enemies without anything more than picking up this miniature lance and using it on the pieces of the board. Well, his surrounding neighbors, many of them enemies, did not dare to attack anymore. They had felt enough of the shock and the pain of what happened whenever they would come against the king. And everyone talked about this and how, if they attacked, their own men would fall into battle against each other. So the king lived in relative peace for quite some time. Nothing of any worry disturbed the kingdom. And he almost grew bored of the monotony of this peaceful life that he had wished for so long. He didn't quite know what to do with himself. He was such a warrior at heart, always looking for some conflict to become engaged in. Well, during this time, Ibrahim Ibn had spent a great deal of time and money, well, not his own time. He had made his quarters into something that was just spectacular. The king, after that first foray that had happened, had offered Ibrahim anything that he wanted. And Ibrahim said that there was nothing that he wanted except to create a beautiful place for him to inhabit, for he said, I am old and I need comforts. And so he had the walls of this underground subterranean palace, so to speak, drawn with beautiful rugs, and he had divans put out, like couches and tables, and had the whole thing decorated in the most beautiful fashion. Remember, he had the hole that looked up into the starry sky. He had baths put in so that he could bathe his body, and perfumes and herbs brought in from all over the place so that he could continue to live in good health. And he had shut himself off in there really to study and just be still and quiet for quite some time, when after a little bit he came out and saw the treasurer once again to ask for something more to be done. Now you have to know that the treasurer had been quite upset by the amount of expense that Ibrahim Ibn had spent on all these furnishings and making his subterranean palace. And so when Ibrahim again showed up, he was like, almost distraught. He'd already gone to the king and talked to the king about it before Ibrahim came and said, he has used up so much money. It's he goes on. And the king is like, that's fine. I really don't mind. It's okay. This is, this is okay with me. Look at what I'm living with now. It's a beautiful thing. And whatever he needs is fine. Let him have whatever he needs. Now, Abraham had come to the treasury. He said, there's one more thing that I really need at this point in time in order to feel fully satisfied, though I was feeling quite satisfied for quite some time, but I feel like I need one more thing. And the treasurer's like, the king has said he will grant you anything that you desire. What is that one more thing? He said, dancers. I need some young dancers. And the treasurer's like, women dancers? And Abraham is like, women dancers would be great, but just young, athletic dancers, capable, beautiful dancers, and maybe some musicians as well, and perhaps a storyteller or a poet, so that I can be entertained at times. For as an old man, youth is such a comfort and is such a beauty to my aging eyes. So if you wouldn't mind, please, if you could have apartments built and have some dancers and musicians and storytellers and poets at my service, that would be just delightful. Well, the treasurer, he thought, it's just crazy. But he was under the orders of the king, so he had all of these people sent for, and that's what happened. Abraham Ibn now had dancers and musicians, storytellers, poets that would come in and perform for him at any time of the day or night. Well, the king continued to live on in peace for quite some time in monotony, as I've mentioned before. No one dared come against him. One day, however, the bronze horseman on top of the tower lowered its lance, and he turned in the direction of the mountains once again. The king went up to the board, but no pieces were moving. So he went to Abraham and asked what was going on. Abraham came up and looked as well, and he said, well, obviously there is some danger there, but no army is on the move. Perhaps you should send out a party to see what they can find. So the king had a search party go. They searched all through the mountains, could not find an army there at all. All they found was a beautiful young Christian woman. And they brought her back with them as a prisoner. And when the captain of the soldiers came and presented himself to the king, he told them that there was no army there, but all that they were able to find was this woman, this young, beautiful woman. And they had brought her in as a hostage, as a prisoner. So the king said, we'll bring her in. I'd like to see her. I'd like to meet with her. And so they did. Now, Abraham Ibn was there as well when she came in. And the king's just taken completely by her beauty. She was young, incredibly beautiful. And she had across her shoulder a lyre, a beautiful silver lyre. And obviously, or at least it looked like, she was a musician of some type. I will tell you, even though the king was old, he could not help but being completely taken by this young woman's beauty. And he said, tell me about yourself. Where are you from? And she said, well, I am the daughter of one of the kings that you've slain. Our army turned against itself, and my father was ruined. He was killed in the battle, and if I had continued on, I would have been taken as a prisoner. So I just started my way through the mountains until your soldiers found me and brought me here. Well, let me take care of you. I will make sure all of your needs are met, he said. Now, Abraham took the king by the arm and led him aside and said, Your Highness, I see a devious woman here, maybe a sorceress, I'm not sure, but I do not see good intent. And also, look at what the horseman did. It pointed out this woman as an enemy. I think you should let me have her. And if she is a sorceress, I will be able to dispel any of her dark magic that she wishes upon you. The king was like, what? No way. She is going to be for me. We'll leave the story there. Abraham Ibn and the king are now in an argument, and we'll see what happens next. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you for joining.